Hello and welcome to The Alternative Path with me, David Robson. This week's guest is a lady called Sharon White. Now, Sharon is somebody that I connected with on LinkedIn. I had a couple of messages backwards and forwards. I'm delighted to get her on today. Now, Sharon is the award-winning director of Educating Horizons. So, Sharon, thanks for coming on today, but just start by giving us a bit of an intro to who you are.
Yeah, thanks, David, and thanks for having me on your podcast. So, yeah, I'm currently the director of Educating Horizons, and I started the company up in 2023, and we believe in changing systems to change lives. And I work predominantly with local authority, with schools, with the voluntary sector, faith organisations. So that's what I normally do on a day-to-day now. But prior to that, I used to work in education. My background was I was a teacher for about 20 years, and it culminated in me being head of alternative provision in Swindon. And I loved that job, I really did. And then I moved over. I keep saying this, and I've been quoted, funny enough, on LinkedIn, David. I say I moved over to the dark side, which was local government, and I'll talk about that a bit later on. I'm sure you'll prize that. Me. I thought, let's move over to the dark side, local government. I love them, really. And it culminated again in a promotion and head of inclusion. And also I've worked in City Hall, in the Mayor's office, London Violence Reduction Unit. I was very privileged to be able to work there just under a year. So I've had quite a varied career, but ultimately throughout it all, it's about working on behalf of vulnerable, marginalised communities. I think, David, that sums up my motive in a nutshell, and I'm sure we'll go into it in more detail.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. One of the, we could go right back to the beginning, but I think a good place to start would be, obviously you said you had like 20 years as a teacher.
Yeah.
And then you made the decision to go on to being head of an AP in Swindon. So let's kind of start from that point. So you'd been a teacher and then you decided to make that step across. Was that you were a teacher in mainstream and then moved across to AP?
Yeah.
So tell us about what made you make that decision.
Yeah, so I funny enough, I was born in Liverpool. You can't tell by my accent, but I love Liverpool FC. They're my team, and I was actually born in Liverpool, and we moved down to London in the 80s. So I was born. I was living in Bromley. That's where I used to live. That's where I met my husband, and we had 3 kids at the time in Bromley, around that area. I saw a job advertised, I think in the TES, I saw it advertised for a coordinator working in Swindon. And I said to my husband, I think, do you know what? Let's go for it. I think let's go for it. I'm going to go. I've never heard of Swindon, didn't know where it was, but I was quite interested in working with children with special educational needs. So up until that point, I've been in many mainstream schools, David. I've worked across London, particularly southeast London, I would say. But I worked in independent schools as well, and it's quite interesting because Woldingham School, shout out to them, working with those girls there. It was quite interesting because you could see that they didn't need teachers, really. They were just facilitating themselves. They were just so brainy and so bright and able to access the materials, because I was a DT teacher. That was my trade. So my PGCE is in design technology. But I was increasingly working more with children with special educational needs. Either they hadn't been assessed or they had been assessed. And so I was going down that direction. And then when I saw that advert in Swindon, it was children in AP. And again, it did talk about potentially having special educational needs. And something did intrigue me about that. So we packed up from London and we moved to Swindon. And that starts the tale of of the alternative path, really, in terms of alternative provision. Because so predominantly I was working in mainstream, like I said, and alternative provision. That was it for me.
How did you? Because I know from kind of different areas we work. AP in Norfolk versus AP in London is very different. So how was making that switch from Southeast London to Swindon AP in terms of the demographics, the
Yeah.
pupils, the parents, the carers, all that sort of stuff. It's a huge change to move from mainstream to AP, but equally as an area, it will also have its differences. So how was it when you first kind of turned up day one?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it was a culture shock just in terms of moving the whole family. Fortunately, I've got 4 kids now, but like I said, it was 3 at the time, and they were young, so they didn't mind. I think just prior to that, Dave, just to give you a bit of insight as to why I did that as well, I was beginning, and it does tie into my my story later on. I was beginning to see a lot more happening in terms of criminal activity in Southeast London, and hence why it propelled me to sort of think about moving out of London. So I think that most probably is the area that I haven't sort of mentioned. So I remember when with the 3 kids, I used to see a blood trail. Somebody's obviously been stabbed, and this was just outside our house. Our car was stolen on numerous occasions, robberies, burglaries, all that type of thing. So I thought, most probably in the back of my mind, I thought we need to get out of London. And then when we arrived in Swindon, it was a complete culture shock, like I've said previously. So I just find the people in Wiltshire very friendly. I'm not saying people in London aren't friendly, but open. So that was just quite a shock. You get out of your car, you'd be greeted with good morning. This time it was like, what? Somebody's actually greeted me saying good morning. And, I was there last week, funny enough, delivering some training. And again, a complete stranger just came up to me and said, morning, and you're just not used to that in London. So that was in the back of my mind. It was a case of, we need a new lifestyle. I was thinking about my family. And for me, when I was meeting those parents, it was completely different because compared to what I've been used to in London. I think they always say that if you're living in Swindon, you're a couple of years behind what's happening in London. And I think that is true of maybe the mindset. I don't want to upset people, but I think in terms of the mindset, because it's a different lifestyle compared to London. It's very fast paced, and working with those parents, and I felt there was a bit of a difference, but it was something that I brought an edge to because I worked in London. I was able to bring that, I think, that spin, working with those parents and giving them the insight as to what was happening in a wider scale. Because I think with Swindon, they're very much thinking about that space and not beyond sometimes. And, particularly when we were starting to see some county lines activity with some of the pupils, and they were invariably heading out to either Bristol or London. This is where my expertise of what had been happening in London was brought to the table in Swindon. But it was, in terms of delivery, nothing was different. Children are children. And I really did particularly love those children that had been permanently excluded from mainstream school, and they hadn't been given that opportunity to thrive. And they were the kids that I really took to, and that was for me the pinnacle, I would say, of why I was there.
Okay, so how long did you then stay in Swindon for?
Yeah, we were there for 13 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then, what kind of, obviously, so you'd left London, you'd had that change, change in area. What then? Fast forward 13 years, you then took the decision to move back to London. So what kind of?
Yeah. That's a really good question. So all my family, like I said to you, we lived in Bromley. So I think, again, it was a pull from the family perspective. I thought, my mum's getting older. We weren't seeing her as often in Swindon, even though it's a 45-minute jump on the train. We still weren't doing that. And I just felt, for me, I'd done all I'd had to do in Swindon, really. And I just thought, let's move back, which I think to some level, and we sold our house, David, and moved again wholesale from Swindon back into London. And I think that was very, very naive in terms of, again, as I said, when you're in Swindon, you're in a bubble. You're not realising the house prices, obviously the rise of the crime in some hotspot areas, all types of things like that. But in terms of the curriculum, I could see that children in London, in terms of their outcomes, they were excelling far greater than those children outside of London. And I think the stats play that as well. So I thought, let's move the kids back as well, because they're heading into their GCSE ages, and I think, you know, it would be good for them to benefit from, you know, the better outcomes. So that was really my decision. And again, David, I just saw a job Barking Dagenham. I thought, where is this? I don't even know this place, you know, because again, you know, my family are in the southeast. So I applied for it. It was senior inclusion manager. I thought, yeah, look, I've worked with these kids in the PRU, and for me, David, it was too late. It was a secondary PRU. It was too late for the majority of them. You could see that we needed to think about holistic approaches, working with a family. I'd commissioned youth workers in the PRU, which was a game changer back then, to not just come in and do a couple of hours delivery, but they were part and parcel of the staff. They used to take the children out over the weekends. And I tell you something, the outcomes really did improve with embedding, you know, youth workers as part of the staff team. So I just thought to myself, early intervention and prevention, I need to go on the other side and see if I can do something in local government to work with the schools to prevent that sort of trajectory, you know, that prison pipeline trajectory that we all talk about.
One of the things I just want to go into there, and it's probably quite a prickly topic, I would say, is the, you know, there is a kind of trajectory that people look at in terms of PRUs.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there is a stigma, and you know, I visit some APs, PRUs that are awesome and do amazing things and get great outcomes, but there is, you know, I talk to some of them and they struggle to get their young people into colleges because of the stigma that comes with, oh, you've been to that PRU. So what, interestingly, you mentioned something there that you felt like it was too late for some of these young people. I think that's a really, I mean, in-depth, interesting topic. So what do you think is behind that, and what could, this is a really big question, but what can be done to try and get rid of that?
I mean, I was on the Labour Party conference via Nurture UK. They kindly invited me on the panel last year, and I quoted some statistics in terms of primary exclusions, and then it's just rising. And for me, David, and that's what we'll talk about later in terms of, you know, direction of travel and where I'm going with Educating Horizons. It's about early intervention and prevention. So I'm a bit of an outlier because obviously my background is education. But for me, it's more about the early help approach. And this is why I said it was too late. You know, for some of these families in Swindon, that's PRU was the provision that they had gone to as kids, the parents. And it was almost like the school of choice, you know, like, you know, because they trusted it and it was just endemic in them. They just felt, yes, I want my child to go to that provision. And I just think really we can't denigrate AP because they do fantastic job. We did as a team, we did a fantastic job. We were fortunate to get Good on the last Ofsted visit that I was the head of. And again, that's about partnership working, partnership approaches. I'm sure we'll talk about that. For me, investment in alternative provision. It's not one size fits all for all children, but for secondary, for some of those children, it was a bit too late and we needed early intervention and prevention much earlier. Now, we had that sure start, didn't we? Most probably around the time that I was in the PRU. And it did make some improvements. But I think moving forwards, we need to think about the DFE's family hubs. We need to think again about how we incorporate our youth practitioners, how we embed them in schools, not just or AP, but mainstream, because they do a fantastic work, you know, mentoring and helping holistically the families as well. It's not just the children, it's the parents they do brilliant work with. So I think it's the holistic approach moving forward that I think we all need to go down. And that's why I'm a bit annoyed with these Ofsted. I don't know what your thoughts are, David, on the Ofsted, the unveiling of the Ofsted report card, because I still think it's just more of the same. We need to be thinking about, think family, think the child approach. What are the outcomes for that child? from the point that they arrive into that establishment, and what's the progress and what does that look like. It's not just about academic attainment, etc. It's also about the standing as an individual in society, and how we can help them move forward and propel them into the next phase of their life. I think that's what I would like to see. Whether I answered your question, I do not know, but yeah.
I think one of the, in talking to schools at our end, and from like being involved in a governing body, I think I agree with so much of that, but I do find so much frustration, and lots of it comes down to budgets. Like, let's be honest, but I do find it frustrating that, in my opinion, for mainstream schools, there is so much expectations for the school itself to sort out all the things going on with families, pupils, and other authorities outside of that school are, because of the number, the volume, they're stretched. There isn't, so everything's pushed back onto the schools, and then schools are, in my opinion, don't have the resources. The schools that do have the resources almost get penalised for doing that, because of like how schools are rated and judged, and I just think, like the employers NI, for example, that's a thing that I think is going to penalise those schools that are being inclusive. They have lots of one-to-one support for young people. They have those like wraparound care for those children in need. They're going to get penalised because their staff wage bill is so much higher than schools that maybe don't take that approach. So again, it's like it's kicking those mainstream schools that try and do those things, and that's my frustration. We talk to loads of schools who want to support children, but they just it's really frustrating. So that then takes me on to your kind of probably step into government or step into local authority. So what kind of motivated you to make that move then from working directly in a school or provision setting to working in authority?
So it's like I said, I thought to myself, look, by the time they come to us, this is too late. So for me, when I was in head of inclusion or in inclusion, education team, David, it was about commissioning quality alternative provision. Okay, so that's what it was about for me. It was about driving inclusive practices. So I would say Barking and Dagenham is not one of the largest boroughs in London, but and also I've got to say, compared to other boroughs, it hasn't got a vast amount of academies. Okay, so the head of education, director, of education, she calls it the family of schools, and I do believe that still remains that the education team, they're held in high regard by the schools. So when I was going in as an advisor, doing that school improvement work, what we were advising them, how we were talking to them about inclusive practices, it was valued. Because there was that relationship and that partnership approach. And it's going back to your point, because I agree with you. I don't think we should be putting all the emphasis on schools. So hopefully we'll talk about it later, about what I'm trying to move into, and through digital and through Intel. I think personally it's about a partnership approach. And that was what I tried to do, David, in local government. So it wasn't just, all right, you're in education, so you commission something and then you provide something for schools. This was about, right, okay, it's economies of scale. Let's look at early help. Let's look at CAMS, or targeted early help. Let's look at the police, the safer school officers. And so I came up with something called the Vulnerable Pupil Hot Clinic. So it was bringing all the partners together so that schools, when they did have concerns about children, we were able to meet need in a quicker way, because people hold their own data about these children. And it was about, can we join the story up? So you've got your part of the story for that child, young person, and family. Can we bring it all together? And that's what I found quite powerful in local government. It was a case of, let's not work in silo, because I do tend to work in different boroughs, and I'm still seeing services working in silo, and sometimes, you know, providers are maybe being commissioned, you know, double funded, you know, and that's another story about effectiveness of budgets and local government. We can talk about that another time. But I'm just saying, really, ultimately, we need to be working together in partnership. And that's what I try to do with the head teachers, with the schools, parents, of course, and then ultimately with the services, either in, you know, in the council or external to the council, statutory services. And it's about pulling them all together. And ultimately, we did have the lowest exclusions and suspensions in London, David, during my tenure, because again, it was about driving inclusive practices. We commissioned something called the Thrive approach. So it was really down to, in terms of pedagogical aspect of working and understanding trauma-informed approaches, really getting that across as a universal offering. You know, so we really did do that, push that, and that did have lots of effects in terms of you know, outcomes and you know, the exclusion rates. And then there were other bits and pieces, like I said. So then I was joint funding things with health, you know, the CCG at the time, obviously now it's ICB. So my good mate Ronan Fox, I'd go to him and say, have you got any money? And say, can we do a joint venture? And again, I'll do the same with my friend in the YJS, have you got any money? And we do a joint venture. And this is what I felt was quite powerful, because you can't work in silo. We haven't got enough money, but if we can come together, that's the powerful thing, because we're all working to the same goal. That's what I felt in local government. And yeah, it was successful. You know, I had a very good team, and it was a good time.
Good stuff. And probably also opened up, like, interesting for you to see how it works, like the other side of the, and again, it shouldn't be the other side of the fence, because like you say, it should, if everyone worked together, but you know, there is, it does look different from wherever you sit, in different places, doesn't it? So probably, like, again, it's like experience for yourself as well is massive. So then on to Sharon White today. So as director of Educating Horizon, so what, tell us a bit about Educating Horizon. What is your kind of goal with that, and where it's going?
Yeah, so just before I start that, so I left that job in Barking Dagenham's head of inclusion, and then I moved into the violence reduction unit. And again, it was precipitated by a high number of children, you know, violence affecting young people. That's what was happening at the time in Barking and Dagenham as inclusion. So I was getting phone calls, working with the, you know, community safety partnership team, you know, children being stabbed fatally, unfortunately at times. So I thought, again, my mindset, David, was, let's see if I can try and make a difference in the violence reduction unit as a commissioner, because they're obviously a very strong funder. So let's see if I can make a difference and try and do that, you know, that contextual aspect, working pan London, and try and do that. So that's what I did do. And it opened my eyes to the work of voluntary sector organisations, not just in one local area. Obviously, I was just used to one borough, particularly maybe Newham, Redbridge and Havering as neighbouring boroughs, but it just opened up the good practice across London. And I got to meet a lot of fantastic organisations in different settings and different meetings across London, and understand what they were doing to drive down, you know, the negative outcomes for particularly marginalised communities that had been affected by inequality, iniquity, you know, violence that had affected them, and the trauma. So I worked there for just under a year, and then I stepped out, David, again. No job. I just thought, right, let's go. Let's set up my own organisation, Educating Horizons. And like I said, it's about changing systems to change lives. So I was getting a bit frustrated at that time about systems. For me, when I've tried to do anything, embed anything, it's about looking at the system, the wider system, and trying to affect that change to you know, affect the most undervoiced, I would say, you know, those children, those young people, those adults that don't have a voice. So yeah, and then very fortunate to receive contracts working again in local government, particularly on the youth offer that came out 2023. There was a lot of statutory guidance on the youth offer. So I've worked in a couple of boroughs helping them shape that, and they're doing some brilliant work on that. So it's funny, my trajectory has moved away from sort of school improvement, David, if you see what I mean, and it's moved into more of that holistic approach. That's what excites me, because I do a lot of coaching, I work with head teachers, and it's about trying to pull everything together in terms of that partnership. So if you're in a school, look around you in terms of the community, you've obviously got some real quality providers there that could be commissioned locally as part of alternative provision, but they may not. But they may have received funding from, particularly from the Violence Reduction Unit. Is there any chance that they can do some work in your school? You know, what's that relationship like between, you know, parents and the school, and parents and particular certain groups, demographics that maybe have mistrust of authority? So are we culturally competent when we're working with schools, with parents, sorry? That's the type of thing that I'm quite interested in, understanding the trauma for children, particularly from certain demographics, you know, underserved communities. Are we understanding their journey as well? And that's what really excited me about setting something up, working with different type of partners across the spectrum. And that's what I currently do now. So it's almost like a culmination of everything I've done up until that point, and it's different facets of the wheel brought in, and you know, just fired off in different directions.
Well, hopefully the kind of experience you've had from the schools, the local authority, different boroughs and different county in Wiltshire, you know, that can only make it a better offering. And something that kind of like jumped out, and I kind of want to say this because I think it's important, is all that stuff you've spoken about there in terms of what you're doing now takes me to the thought that all that stuff should hopefully then reduce that reality that for some of those young people in secondary PRU it is too late. All that stuff you're doing in the background and not putting words in your mouth, but it just seems to loop from kind of like working in education, going around in a circle, getting that feeling of, for some of these young people it's too late, to then igniting something that takes you around almost full circle, which I think, you know, whether that's true, that's just how it appears as like an image to me, I suppose.
That's lovely, David. I've never thought of it, because we always think we're on a journey, but you're right, it's almost like I didn't think of it in a circular way, but it is coming full circle. For me, it's always been about, you know, even before birth of some of these children, and we've seen it in the news. We've seen it in the news, particularly with Sarah. She was known to services before birth. So it's what can we do as a wraparound? And I held a lot of data when I was in local government about children, about families. And the team that I'd worked with, I mean, I'd just hopped on board there, moving from Swindon. Some of them had been working, you know, my team, they've been working there for 20 years. So they knew the parents, again, they knew the parents as children that had been suspended, you know. So it's just going around generationally, you know, going around in circles. So it's about that data, and that's what's really my focus in the next 18 months. It's about the data that we will hold. Particularly we saw with Axel, you know, people are not sharing that data, and then we're not meeting need at you know, it's not being expedited, it's not being met at an earlier stage. And that is why this is something very close to my heart. We need to be doing that, joining the dots, I've called it when I've written an article for the Digital First magazine. It's about joining those dots, because people hold some rich data, but it's not being pulled together to almost, you know, have that overview of the child, or the overview of the person, the young person, the child's view. And I think we need to be incorporating that much better. And again, there'd be savings there, David, you know, because if we can mitigate risk, of course, it's not going to hopefully escalate to the point that you know, we've got fatalities, we've got, you know, homelessness, worklessness, all these aspects that we see, you know, in terms of children's trajectory, because they've been kicked out of school and they've not been able to achieve, and then they're just going down a different path. We need to be able to mitigate that and disrupt it, I call it, and try and see what can we do.
I can't help but feel like from a kind of commercial side, looking at it from my side, you know, AP does amazing things for amazing young people, but I almost feel like there's an AP is needed for lots of young people.
Yeah.
But I also think, you know, there's almost needs to be an investment into schools to create safe spaces, to create more of a kind of a hub, a nurture space, whatever it might be, to then not have to spend the amount of money that is spent on. And some of our business is providing out of school tuition.
Yeah.
In a really weird way, I almost wish it wasn't needed, because I don't, you know, I think the young people should be in a school, in a setting, in a provision, but it just like it's, you know, it's that, oh, there isn't the money to kind of make that initial investment, but there's the money to continuously month by month provide X, but there isn't the amount to go boom, let's, you know, it's almost like putting a plaster on something rather than having it operated.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. That's why, you know, I really was strong on the head teachers, can I say, and a lot of the schools now, they've won awards on, I'm not advertising Thrive approach, but it's just one of the approaches. Nurture UK's Boxall is another one. That is why we've got to be training the staff on trauma-informed approaches, contextual safeguarding, and we need to be looking at adverse childhood experiences, and it needs to be from that level. Head teachers need to understand what is happening for our children. They need to, because you've gone into that profession because you want to improve life chances for children, I'm assuming. So it's a hearts and minds scenario. When I was going there, David, into the schools to almost sell this, you know, what we're trying to do in terms of the vision, it's like you say, why aren't we doing these things internally? And I did look at the Arranging Alternative Provision document. It came out yesterday, the statutory guidance. I've just had a brief look at it. Obviously, it's targeted at local authorities and schools, what they should need to put in place. But you're quite right. Why can't we have that embedded in school? But I think we just got to be mindful that some children, it's not one size fits all. You know, we're all talking about inclusion now as a belonging, is going into belonging. Some children don't feel like they belong in their school, and a fresh start or fresh approach is needed for some children. I do adhere to that. And that alternative provision doesn't necessarily mean a new building. You know, I think we've got to clarify that as well. It could be, as you said, it could be something happening in the building, you know, the mainstream school. It could be somebody coming in and doing something alternative. It could be the traditional, you know, pupil referral units or whatever, you know, IOTAs. But this is what I just want to make clear, that, you know, for me, we need to be thinking, what is alternative provision, you know, for these children? And the leaders, we need to understand why they're not mainstream at this moment in time. Why is it they're not, you know, why, how can we make them tap into this, because it's their education? And some children just don't buy into it. They just don't buy into it at all. And I don't know if that's the personnel, you know, the staff in the school. I don't know if it's the culture. I really don't know. But
I'll be honest. I didn't, as a young person. I was in today's schooling. I wouldn't have continued in mainstream schooling. It was just a different world 25 years ago, you know. But I just couldn't. I couldn't. So like my kind of, yeah, my comment of like the AP, I recognise it. It absolutely is needed and serves so many young people for positive. I just also like think there's lots of young people who could thrive in a mainstream setting with some tweaks. That's probably what I was trying to kind of.
I agree. Completely agree with you. Yeah.
And again, like there is, you know, one AP and another AP, the cohort's polar worlds apart. So it's all and demographics make a difference, don't they? Like you would know, but
no, I agree with you. I mean, I commissioned, it was a pilot, because they like to say the word pilot a lot, in inclusion space in one of the secondary schools. I think they're outstanding now, so that's good. But this is obviously after my time. But we had so we joint funded it, and the school did as well. And it was an inclusion space. So we did it almost for that transition period, David. So, the year sixes in the feeder school, primary, they were going into this school. So we employed a Key Stage 2 teacher in this secondary school. So people were going to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Look, this is almost like a nurture space."
Yeah.
And then we co-located the CAMS team into that space. And then it was a space for parents. So again, this is before the family hubs, but we asked for, that early help colleagues to come in as well. So it was almost like co-location of some of the staff from services in the council to be part of this nurture space. And look, I had to stump up some money for it, but it was joint funding. So, and this is what I'm going back to my point. If we want to be innovative or even think, how can we make some savings? We need to come together with our pots of money. And then for me, schools, let them do what they do best, but co-locate some of the staff that are doing things across the local area, bring them in to work with the parents, to work with the children, not at a designated building that a child is never going to go to for a CAMS appointment. Bring that practitioner in to understand, the experience for that child if they're going to school, or to be a friendly face in the school setting. Youth workers, bring them in. That's what I think personally.
I guess the challenge, and a lot of the times, is London boroughs, I'm sure, but county to county, boroughs to borough, the funding models are so different.
Yeah.
And I was talking to someone the other day who is part of a trust and have a school in a London borough and a school in a home counties, and similar sort of cohort, similar sort of school, but the funding is worlds apart, and that's not right, really, is it? That needs to be kind of looked at, because again, it should be pretty universal within reason.
What's your take on this devolution business? And for example, Essex, they're going to be having their own unitary thing. I don't know what's going on, but I mean, let's hope it works. But I think it's obviously a case of this levelling up business, isn't it? Trying to move the money, isn't it? And I don't know if it's going to work. Is it, or is it mayoral stuff they're trying to assign?
I'm not sure what I feel, to be honest. I don't think I have enough kind of, although we're based in Essex, I don't actually have much in kind of involvement in Essex. Strangely, we do lots of kind of Cambridge to Suffolk, Norfolk, Surrey, bits of London. I think it needs to change. Talking from a governor in a local school, I think there is, I'm so proud of what our primary school does and is doing, and it's like forward thinking, but I think a lot needs to improve, if I'm being completely honest. And it, inclusion is so important, but I do think, and I work with some amazing schools in loads of different counties, that I used to say go above and beyond to be inclusive, but actually it's doing what they should do.
Exactly.
It's and that sounds, it's not a criticism, it's just like as a parent, as an outsider of working in a school, but there are like quite costly costs and things that then become a negative to a school for going down that route. I would love to see more of a push from local authorities to make every school follow the same rules and things for inclusion, and spread, have an evenly, like in every area. I'm sure there's hotspots of schools that have a higher number of SEN, a higher number of children in need. I think it should be spread, and then in society, it would be a better thing, because it's, you wouldn't have the pockets of need. But that's
I think that's spot on. I mean, what you get though is, remember, you get parents' preference as well with schools, and so it's hard to do that, from a local authority perspective, because I'm sure many admissions teams would say they'd love to do that in terms of spreading out the children. But then you get, if it's going down a statutory route, then as you know, it's hard to do that because it's then parental preference. And then obviously, like you've said a couple of times, schools are doing so well, they're almost shooting themselves in the foot, because then again, parents are going to say, well, I'm sending my child to that school because their outcomes seem to be better, and especially looking at the single grading of outstanding, which obviously is gone now. That's the type of thing parents are looking at, isn't it, when they're making those decisions? So I think you're right. I mean, it's going back to that report card system, and what is the narrative about the school as well in terms of the write-up? It's not hopefully just going to be all coloured graphs coloured grids and all this effective and embedding or whatever, all this nonsense, and then green and amber and red. It's more about what is actually the narrative around it. So the school is working in partnership with early help. The school is working in partnership with the safer school officers, because there's a high rise of activity happening for children. This is the type of thing I'm saying. Is it going to be outside of the box, or is it all just going to be about results? That's
so hard. Who knows? But I think one of the key things, and you mentioned it, and I speak to loads of people who work or want to work in the sector. 99% of the people 99 point something percent of the people I've ever spoke to want to work in education to make a positive difference to young people, no matter what, whether you're primary, secondary, FE, special, AP, residential. That is the main driver. And I think to kind of sum up our conversation, it would be, if anything can be tweaked or changed to make all the kind of moving parts work more in unity, then that can only be a positive for the young people. And one of the reasons we brought the podcast back is because, like, coming out of COVID, I felt that everybody was keen to talk about what they were doing and share their things. And I feel like the last 12-18 months, everybody's kind of, not everybody, but lots have kind of gone the opposite. And really, it's a challenging time, whether you're a school, a recruitment agency, a shop on a high street. It's a tough time, and it is probably going to get tougher. But I just think that to me means we need to talk more. We need to share what we're doing. Not everybody's going to agree, and that's fine. But talking and sharing what people are doing, for me, is only a positive. So that's.
I completely, again, I'm agreeing with you, because there was some excellent practice going on during COVID. But I think what really put off a lot of senior leaders was when Ofsted then resumed their inspections. They didn't really consider any of it, at all. So, I mean, again, this is what I'm saying with the inspection. Are they going to be asking, what are your success stories? What have you done? The things that you go above and beyond. That's inclusion, whatever you want to call it. It's not just about SEND and about those children, vulnerable children, disadvantaged children. This is also about what are you doing as part of the community, because that's what a school is. It's probably one of the most vital parts of the community.
100%.
And how has that been showcased to Ofsted, so they can learn from that as well? I think that's what, it was some brilliant practice. I mean, it was a terrible time in local government during that time. It was because the guidance was just changing left, right, and centre. But it was a really good time to see what the schools, how they really, I mean, they do brilliant jobs anyway, but how they really were going above and beyond. But that's not sustainable. They can't do that all the time. And again, you've mentioned the funding, but also staffing capacity. And at the end of the day, their job is to educate. And that's why I'm saying co-location of other staff, other services. We need to think again about how we deliver services. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and rightly or wrongly, schools are still judged on outcomes most of the time, rather than progress from where was that young person when they arrived and where are they now? Because the progress could be humongous, but the outcome might not be A stars and top grades, but the journey of that pupil could be mega. Sharon, conscious of your time, and it's been an absolute pleasure in talking to you.
Same.
Yeah, there's so much to take out of that conversation, so much more we could go into, but I just want to thank you for coming on, and I wish you all the best in growing educating horizons. If anybody can get hold of you, we'll make some links in the show notes, but is there anything you just want to finish up with today?
Yeah, I think for me, we're moving forward now on MVP, David, on it's called Collab Plus, and it's just literally what I've been talking about. So it's bringing together the partnership, really. So it's early help, education, schools, local authority, health, social care, etc. And it's about joining the dots, I'm calling it, but it's the product is actually going to be called Collab Plus. So we're looking for investment. So that's something that is needed, because I do want to get this MVP up. Yeah, and I think we need to do that, because we need to protect the most vulnerable children, but we really do need to work as a partnership across local areas, and that's something that I'm going to keep doing.
Brilliant. Sharon, thank you for coming on, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.